Welcome, welcome, everyone. We'll give everyone about one more minute to arrive. All right, it's 1:01. Well, good afternoon and welcome everyone to the Urban Ministries Lunch with an Artist series, where we sit down with a local artist and learn firsthand aspects of being an artist. This is an interactive event, so please feel free to ask your questions. We love to hear from you in real time. Today, we have the opportunity to connect with Candelaria Norma Silva, an author, arts administrator, and facilitator. She connects community-based groups to the arts, coordinates the Creative Entrepreneur Fellowship for the Arts and Business Council of Greater Boston, and is project manager of the Fellows Athenaeum Trust Fund for the programs at the Roxbury branch of the Boston Public Library. She was formerly director of ACT Roxbury, a cultural economic development program under whose auspices she founded the Roxbury Film Festival, Roxbury Literary Annual, Roxbury Open Studios, and Roxbury Discussion Series. She has published a series of children's picture books featuring an active and imaginative Black girl, Stacy Huggins. They are Stacy Became a Frog One Day, 2020, Jump, 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 Stacy, 2021, and What's the Baby's Name, Stacy, 2022. Candelaria's children's stories, fiction, essays, and reviews have been published in local and national publications, and she is active on social media and a frequent blogger. Candelaria, welcome.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Okay, good.
So much.
Well, thank you. It's nice to see friends and new people. I'm always happy to meet people, and we're going to talk a lot about, I thought I'd maybe start out with my sort of writing journey. And I have a few things that I'll hold up, and then I thought we might look at my website and just talk about being a writer. So the first thing I ever had published was actually a poem in my high school yearbook. I wrote it, I graduated from University City Senior High School outside of St. Louis, Missouri. The first 2 years were in Soldan, an all-Black high school. Second years were in a predominantly, at that time, Jewish high school in University City. And we did a class poem, and they liked it, and I was the first living person that they had in the yearbook, but I couldn't afford to buy the yearbook at the time. So my sister actually found it for me maybe 20 years after I graduated at a yard sale. So I actually now have a copy. I came to Boston and I did a lot of poetry and did a lot of poetry readings around town at Northeastern, and did some writing. While I was at Northeastern, I submitted a story called Falake to Be, which was accepted by Essence magazine. My mother called me and told me that this thin envelope had come, and she read it. And of course, she told my whole family in St. Louis, and guess what happened? Essence never published it. So I had egg on my face. There are a lot of people in my family that don't believe that it ever got accepted. And somewhere in my files, I actually have the letter. And so that hurt me so bad that for a few years, I didn't do anything with my writing. I did local stuff. And then Ebony Jr. came along, which was a publication for children from Ebony magazine. And so I had a couple of stories accepted there. And looking back, and I'll show those on my website at some point, I got them published, one when I was pregnant with my daughter in 1975, and the second one when I was pregnant with my son. And then Ebony Jr. a few years later ceased publication, which was so bad, because it was, the magazine had pictures. All these kids would send in drawings and pictures of themselves, and all of this is, for those of you who are younger, this was all pre-smartphones, personal computers. Everything was done in the mail, so you'd send something. But I wanted to show you another thing I did. The Bay State Banner, I used to do reviews for them. So when I came to college, because I had reviewed for some newspapers in St. Louis, I asked them if I could review. So anyhow, there was an ad, and there was a thing for this book called the Dictopedia. which was a children's reader from the Addison Wesley Corporation. And at that time, there was the woman who was the editor was named Pleasant T. Rollin. She went on years later to found the American Girl Doll Company, but none of us knew that that was going to happen at that point, and maybe she did. But this was the story called Nevermind. It's a 2-page story. And what you had to do was an alphabetical book. So all the stories had to have something to do with a letter of the alphabet. And so this is a little boy and his mother's asking him, where's her thread? And it turns out she's been sitting on it. And he says, never mind. So there's a story in that. So, and let's see, I submitted a lot of, one particular manuscript to Little Brown Company and went back 3 times with the editor, and they ultimately didn't publish it. So that pushed me back into my shell again. So what I did was I just kept writing. And I'll bring you up to date here, but I'll stop because Bithyah has a question or somebody else might have one.
Yes, thank you. And that also reminds me to let everyone know this is interactive. So please feel free to raise your hand, put something in the chat, and we'd love to address your questions, because when do we ever get the opportunity to speak to a children's book author in real time? So thank you so much. Candelaria, I'd like to know, how did you learn about all these opportunities? You talked about, before the internet, before smartphones, early on you were submitting work. So how did you access all those openings and opportunities?
I always tell people to read. It's not illegal yet, as they say in some quarters. Maybe it was Grandmaster Flesh. Somebody said that, George Clinton maybe. So I would read the Bay State Banner religiously. In those days, I didn't read the Dorchester Reporter. And in fact, this probably predated the Dorchester Reporter, or maybe a little after, but I do now read. I read papers religiously still. And I looked on a lot of bulletin boards. And when I would go in the library, I'd look at the circulation desk. And even before the internet and social media, there were flyers and there were postcards. And so I would always look at them and I'd come home. The other thing that almost everybody on here who knows me knows that I do is that if I find out something that I think might be good for you, I send it to you. And the reason for that is that there's several opportunities that I found out about later in my life that existed when I was younger, but the people who knew didn't share them with me. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, so what I've learned to do now is I share it with you and then I let it go. I only bug, like I would bug my friend Sala, and I might send her a few reminders because I'm like, Sala, you should do this. But if I don't really know you, I'm just going to send you the information. And then for me, that's my part of the deal. So and even today, flyers and postcards continue to be a way that I inform people about my work, in addition to social media, because what I find about social media is that it works when I'm looking and I'm looking at the list, but I'm connected to so many people. They put up stuff and I have no idea. If somebody sends me a direct email, then, if Tran sends me a direct email, I'm going to put it and I'm going to make sure that I get back to it. It'll be in my head. So read. And now I go to a lot of websites that have, like, the Mass Cultural Council has a thing called ArtSake. And so on a regular basis, they put out opportunities for artists of various disciplines.
Yes, and I see a comment in the chat that if there's ever awards for sharing info fast, Candelaria better win. Yes, I'm actively keeping my ear open because, seriously, you you do a lot of good, Candelaria. And I want to get to your books. Oh, I see. Oh, a thumbs up. Okay.
Well, before we do that, can I share? I want to share a couple of other things with you. There used to be this magazine that a guy named Roy Krantz did called Blue Magazine, and it was done for the neighborhoods in Boston. He started in Roxbury, and I have a very fragile copy, but I can't find the cover of it. Maybe my fingers won't open it. But anyhow, I submitted something to him, and it's a story called No One to Dance With. Right? This is an adult story. Can you all see the image? Now, let me tell you what's important about this image, and this taught me something about when you submit and when you do a query. If you want the people in your story to have curly hair, to have brown skin, to be Black, you better say it, because what happened here is the story in my head had Black people in it, but nowhere in the story do I mention that the people are Black. right? They're in a nightclub, they're dancing, and it's a very adult story, let's just say that. And so the picture is of people in a smoky bar, but none of them are Black. And so even though it fits the story, and even though I was thrilled to have the story published, I was a little disappointed because it wasn't of Black people. And when the magazine came out and I kept telling people I have a story, and they would look and they'd say, I didn't see any stories with Black people in them. I said, my story's in there. Look, no one to dance with, and it has my name. And then they'd go back. So I realized that that was something important to do. And then the other thing is that as part of Act Roxbury, which you mentioned earlier, we did the Roxbury Literary Annual, and the first 2 were for adults, and the final 4 under my watch were for teens. So this was the first Roxbury Literary Annual that we published. And we put it at the bookstores. Jamaica Way Books was around. And so I submitted to this, but we did blind submissions so that when you submitted, we didn't know your name on the committee. And luckily the committee voted my story in, because I don't know what I would have done if I had submitted and they said, don't like this story. But so one of the ways is creating your own stuff. And then finally, about 4 years before I did the children's books, I did a series of brochures. The first one was called Handling Rejection, which is an inspirational essay, and I have them. I can bring some. The second one was called Pushing Through Shyness, and it's called Networking Tips When You're Shy, Slow to Warm Up, Inexperienced, or Don't Feel You Belong. And believe it or not, I'm a shy person. Nobody believes that. I know how not to be shy when I'm in a role, but as myself, I am. And then there was real questions about sex and relationships for teens. And so I published those, and they didn't do as well as I thought they would. And so then I tucked my tail in for a few more years and didn't do anything with my writing except write. I kept writing, but I didn't try to get published. So now I'll stop and let you go.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask you, do you ever republish those materials? Because they sound pertinent.
I have enough copies, I don't have to republish them. So if anybody wants any, I can, put your name in the chat or send me an email and I can send you copies of them.
You heard it first here, folks. All right. Yes, and please put anything you'd like us to know in the chat, or if you'd like Candelaria to get in touch with you, then we'll make a note of it. So Candelaria, these books you have published 3 books in as many years, starting in 2020. So this sounds like someone really, really about it. Why now? And what have you learned in this short amount of time doing so much publishing?
Why now was about in the fall of 2019, actually in the first year of 2020, I was running, I am a project manager for the Fellows Athenaeum Trust Fund, which funds programs specifically at the Roxbury branch. The Roxbury branch was closed for renovations, and so the piano class teacher taught at Boston Conservatory. So every Saturday morning from about September, October till June, I was there. And one of the last people we admitted into the class was a woman named Delonda Coleman. And while her daughter was upstairs taking classes, she says, may I show you something? And she pulled out her book, More Than a Princess. And it was beautifully done. She says, I said, oh, that's such a beautiful book. And how could I buy a copy and everything? And I said, I have all these children's book manuscripts. She says, oh, I can help you do that. I said, really? She says, yeah, I am just moving here. She worked as a project manager for Microsoft. I do project management, and I'll send you a proposal. Just send me, we exchanged emails. So I wrote her, sent her my materials. Her daughter wasn't in class the next week. Daughter wasn't in class the following week. And I thought, I haven't heard from her. She's full of what. And then she came in the next week and she said, I'm so sorry, I had to go back to finish some stuff, transporting stuff. And she said, yeah, I'm going to send you a proposal by the end of the week. And she did. And so she gave me 3 proposals. And what she did was I hired her as a project manager. And so she oversaw the whole process. And then COVID happened. And so I had time because, we weren't doing public programs. We hadn't yet pivoted to Zoom. People were still discovering what Zoom was, most of us. And so I had time And even though my husband had been pushing me for many years to go on and do this, but we actually had a couple of really bad fights about me not wanting. I really wanted a traditional publisher because I reviewed books for so many years for the Horn Book and School Library Journal and the Banner. And so anyhow, long story short, so she and I worked together, and then the book almost didn't get published because we hired an editor to look at the work. She did everything from finding my illustrator. So she went to a place called Upwork, we did an illustration brief, which she helped me do. We came up with several people. We narrowed it down. We chose the illustrator. We had an editor, and the first editor I read for the first book, which is Stacy Became a Frog One Day, which is this one. The woman totally rewrote my story. And she rewrote it. It was beautifully rewritten, but it had nothing of me in it. And I literally, my husband didn't know I was down here in my office where I am now, and I started crying, and I said, you know what, I'm just kidding myself. I can't do this. So the next morning I get a call from Delonda, and she says, hey, I didn't hear from you about the editors. And I said, she said, well, did you look at the next person? Did you look at the other one? Because we've gotten 3 editorial suggestions. She said, no, she says, go back and look. And the third person, all she did was made a couple of suggestions and kept my manuscript. And that's the person that I ended up going with. And she even made a change that I kept until the very last minute, where she said, on the last page, it says, Stacy woke up on Sunday, and instead of imagining she's an animal, she decides to stay a girl, a girl, a girl. Well, the editor had said, change it to a kid, a kid, a kid, so it'd be more inclusive. And I told my husband, but I always heard in my mind this little girl's voice saying, a girl, a girl, a girl. He said, it's your book, keep it. And so I did. And the other thing I'll tell you about that is that it was, for many years when I had written it as a manuscript, it was called Tracy Became a Frog One Day. And about a month before I finally finished with, having the illustrator do it, I woke up and it said, if you change it to Stacy, it's going to have more meaning. And so I'll open to a page and hold it up. So the dedication is, each letter in Stacy stands for somebody who's important to me. So
wonderful.
I don't know if you all can see that well, but the S is for Sage, who's my firstborn granddaughter. The T is for Tommy, who's my son. The A is for my grandson, my first grandson. The A is for Amber, who's my daughter. The C is for Cyrus, who's my son. And E is for everyone who encouraged me, and Y for you too. So that sort of came to me in a kind of dream.
Wow.
That's how that, and why now, why not now? And I liked series as a kid. How many of you have read books as a kid and you really like the idea of reading the character more than once? So I have all these stories that I wanted to do.
Thank you so much. I see a few questions in the chat. Number 1, what is your favorite part of the writing process, and what is most painful? From Mary Margaret.
The favorite part of the writing process is having the inspiration to sit it down, and I like making it tighter. So I just submitted to Boston in 100 words, which was a contest for the city, and I did that on Monday, and I started out with something that was more than 130 words, and I had to get it to 100. So going back, and at first you feel like you don't want to cut out any of your words because every word has meaning. And then you find out, oh, I could eliminate that adjective. Oh, I could tighten and say this in 1 word instead of 3. So I like that. And what don't I like? I hate marketing the book. I'm not a good marketer. I was able to hire someone with the first book, and it did more sales than the second 2 have done. I'm having to do a little bit. I'm in the society, the New England chapter of the Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and we have a BIPOC meetup group once a month. And at the last one of the gentlemen who's been published through a traditional press shared some information on what I can do on Goodreads, which I'm already a part of, to promote my book. So I'm going to have to do more of that. I hate marketing it. And I hate when you get an idea and you just can't make it sing. So what I do now is I've learned to just share that title or share that idea in a folder. And then sometimes when I'm writing and I don't have anything I want to write that day, I can go back and maybe that story will get legs.
Thank you so much. I see another question from, oh boy, people are putting a lot in this chat. I can't find it now. Valerie, I think she asked, how are you able to schedule time to write?
Well, I'm a person who doesn't, from the moment I wake up in the morning to the time I go to bed, I'm up. I don't take naps. I never have. And so I'm usually up a good long time, and I fill that time with activity. So I'm either doing my jobs, I'm writing, I'm on my board stuff. I'm constantly, I'm folding the clothes, I'm, doing all that kind of stuff. So I make time. I think you make time for what's important to you. The other thing, a friend of mine who's very religious had told me a few years ago, her interpretation of the beginning of the Bible, which was, God created. And so she said, you have to start your day with creation. And so she said, the first thing in the morning, do something for yourself, create something, and stop doing things for other people. And since I've been following that advice, it has really, really made a difference, because I grew up in a Baptist church, and may the work I've done speak for me, which was one of my favorite hymns. And so for a long time, my life has been motivated by being a community person and giving to others. But what I found was I did so much of that now I'm an old broad just getting around to my own stuff, right? So I try to create first thing in the morning. I might come back later, and like when I go to the hairdresser and I'm sitting under the dryer, I'm writing. When I'm on the MBTA, I'm writing or reading. I'm constantly making time to write, because there isn't more time that's going to come. And I'm learning to say no to certain things. Like I don't have to be on every committee. I can't solve every issue that's been brought to me or that I'm interested in. I stopped writing my blog a lot, although I have a few more posts on my adult site, because blogging was satisfying my writing muscle, but then I realized it wasn't creating a book. And so I had to decide, okay, how am I gonna, I only have so much time, so let me stop writing so much for the blog, which I do enjoy, but let me write more to get books actually finished.
That's a good segue to the next question. Tran asks, what would you have done differently or advise your younger self in your writing journey in hindsight?
I would have not let one no be a forever no. I would have asked questions. So a couple things. When I worked for the Bay State Banner, I didn't ever work for the National, never paid me. When I reviewed for the Bay State Banner, I got an interview with Toni Morrison. I was 8 months pregnant with my daughter. And Ms. Morrison received me with a good friend of hers in her hotel room. And at that time, she was still working for Random House. The Banner published the Banner used to be a big publication. They published 2 weeks of my transcript. It never occurred to me to say, Ms. Morrison, I'm a writer. Would you look at any of my writing? Totally never occurred to me. So that was a missed opportunity. Ms. Magazine wrote me, I submitted a story to them, and they wrote that it was lyrical, it was this, it was that, and they had done a lot of talking in their community group, decision group, and they ultimately decided not to publish it. Now, it was a handwritten note. Years later, when I went to workshops, I learned if somebody sends you a handwritten note, that means you should establish a relationship and you should submit again. But I didn't, because I didn't know what I could, and I was so hurt. And then also, it wasn't like I didn't walk around pouting for years. It wasn't that. Life got busy. I'm doing Act Roxbury. I'm doing the film festival, the literary annual, this, to this, to this. I'm raising my children. So it just takes you away from that. So I would advise younger people, don't tell yourself no. One no doesn't mean a forever no. And if your goal is to be a published writer, then you cannot stop until you achieve that goal, right? So first of all, you're a writer if you write, you're a painter if you paint, you're a singer if you sing, you're a composer if you compose. Now, having a CD, having a completed film, having a completed book is a different process. And now we live in a world where the tools to do something belong to you. And it's interesting in the writing world, even now, self-published writers are not held in the same esteem that people who go through independent and traditional presses are. But in other parts, in other artistic disciplines and creative disciplines, people always start from their own stuff and they always promote their own stuff. So that's beginning to change a little bit, but the marketing part and the distribution part are very hard. So I hope I answered your question, Tran. Okay, thanks.
There's another question. Do you have a favorite place to go to do your writing?
Nope, I can write anywhere. I can write anywhere. I write in this room. I write down the dining room table probably because there's 2 windows and I write there, but I can write on the train. I can, I write anywhere. I don't record and write that much. I keep thinking that might be good because sometimes an idea will pop into my head. And if I could say it quickly, I would capture it more purely than if I make a delay to go find a journal. So I've got, usually I have paper and pen right by my bedside, and something always happens about once a week. I'll be laying in bed and my mind won't let me sleep because an idea will come up on one of the stories that I'm working on. And so the other night I had to literally, after 20 minutes, I got out of bed because I couldn't find my pen and paper. And I came in here, turned on the light, wrote down enough so that I could hold it till the next day, because the things that I do this thing with my brain. I'll say, hold in, stay in. And inevitably I forget it if I don't write it down. So have paper and pens or whatever you use all around me. I have started writing a little bit on my phone because it's always with me, but I'm not as agile as younger people are with my thumbs moving on those letters. So sometimes I've ended up typing in what ends up being gibberish when I look at it later because my thumbs hit the wrong keys.
There's a couple more questions in the chat, and Candelaria, you remind me of what I learned about second sleep. So I've heard that before there was electricity, people would go to bed at the sun would go down. And then this was a common thing that in the middle of the night, you would wake up, your neighbors would wake up and people would write, they would meet, they'd have tea. And I never heard about that. But you remind me of the creative process before electricity. People in the middle of the night, they got up and they created.
Yeah.
There's a question here. How do you think writing is going to be affected by artificial intelligence?
I think that people are resilient, and no matter what they throw at us, we find ways to still be people and to still create. But I do think it's going to cause a lot of confusion, and I think it's already happening. And what's authentic, what's not authentic, from like, I don't usually wear makeup like this all the time, but for you, so you're not seeing my real face, you're seeing a little other face. And I guess there's settings where you can remove a lot of your wrinkles and stuff on. So there's so many things that we're sending out in the world that are not real, so that it becomes hard to know the pictures that you see, are those really pictures, or did somebody Photoshop and make it look like XYZ happened? And the same with words. So I don't think it's going to eliminate humans, but I think it's going to make it harder to know what's true. And so what I think, ironically, is that some of those things are the reasons why now, independent bookstores are coming back. Rosendale just opened one. We have Frugal Bookstore in Roxbury. There's going to be Words as Worlds, I think it's called, in Fields Corner next fall. People are going to want to gather with each other in real time, because then you'll know that person said what I thought they said in real time. And that's why I like print books, because I'm kind of paranoid about electronics. If I write a print book, this edition of this book, this is how it looked. Mm-hmm. If it's on Kindle, somebody can decide to change words from an office somewhere, but this particular print edition, it's always going to be what it was. Now they can change it for the next edition. So I like being able to touch things that are real, and I like seeing people do things in real time. I like when I go to a concert or a club and I hear a singer who can actually sing in the club without all the filters and all the engineering when you have a CD or an album. So I think it's a threat, but I don't think it's an elimination.
That is awesome. We went from a really dark place to like faith and humanity. Wow. You're good, Candelaria. Well,
thank you.
I have another question here. Mary Margaret asks, can you say more about building the capacity to press past rejection and the role of friends and community in that?
Say it again. I'm gonna look
Can you
for
say
it.
more? Yeah, can you say more about building the capacity to press past rejection? So to persevere and pass through, and the role of friends and community in building that capacity.
Um, in my little brochure, Handling Rejection, one of the things that I say is that I wrote it for my son because he, at that time, he was aspiring to be an actor. Now he's more a comedian and he's written a book himself, but he was so rejected, and he's tall, 6'5", et cetera. And I said, they didn't know you. They can't reject you. They can reject your voice. They can reject your size for that part, but they can't reject you because the essence of you is unrejectable. And I say that to myself. The person can reject my version of those words at that time. They don't know Candelaria Norma Silva, right? As an older person, I can see people not come near me because they say, oh, she's an old chick. And in my mind, I think you don't even know who you missed, right? So, but if you reject me from just the physical appearance, then that's your loss. I try not to reject people because of their physical appearance or what I see. So if you understand that people don't know you, they're rejecting this piece of paper, this idea. Sometimes it's just a matter of timing. Some things are coming together for me now where I feel like the stars are aligning, and some of it's been stuff that I put in motion years ago. And so when you think that your support is going to come from this way, and then there's somebody over here who's been watching you or who you did a kindness to once, and they come here. I've had two former students in programs that I ran, hired me to talk about my books. One lives in Canton and one is a MECO director. And literally this is, they were my students. So I had no idea that they would ever be somebody to ask me to come and talk about my books. Oh. So I think if you just know that the role of friends and community, you're going to always have champions, and I like to champion people. And I know that everybody, I try to uplift other people so they will uplift me. But I also have some friends and a few family members who are doubters. I have people who are jealous. Jealousy is a real thing in certain people. So those are not the people that I go through my substance. And I've learned to don't listen, see if anything they're saying has a kernel of truth. You should have done better, or that was a typo, or whatever. Pay attention to that. But don't let, because they didn't achieve their dream or because they don't understand, you go on. My family didn't know that people could make a living as a writer. Now, as an adult, there were people my age who didn't let that no stop them. They continued to do it. So I didn't have that inner push that other people did have. But I luckily, knock on wood, thank the Lord, I'm still here. And if I have a little bit more time, I'm doing what I can with my time now. So, and sometimes strangers can be more supportive because I'm kind of shy. Like when I'm writing about certain things, I don't want to really have people who really know me hear what I'm thinking. So it's easier for me to go to a group of people who are just in a writing class who don't know me to share. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
And then there's a note here that E. Lynn Harris started out as a self-published author.
Yes. Yes, I met him. He came to, it was a bookstore before Frugal Bookstore, and he talked about he had worked for IBM. He quit his job. He was making a lot of money. He had self-printed his first novel, and he was selling it out of the back of his car. And he said he had done a thing where if he didn't sell so many books, he was going to give it up and go back to being a salesperson. And then he got an order. Some school or somewhere, university ordered 95 copies of his novel. Wow. And he was like, okay, that's a sign. And then he went on to get signed by a major publisher. So that's the other thing I will say about rejection. Most of the people who've achieved anything have actually had as many failures and near misses as successes. So you just have to put your time in. And again, if you want it, you have to be unrelenting until you get that thing you want. So what I'm focusing on now, Valerie Bowling is a woman who's here. She's teaching a children's writing course. She has 3 books in print, 3 more coming out this year, 2 more in subsequent years. I'm taking her writing course, and I'm taking the 12 by 12 book challenge, which is still open for people to sign up for, because I do want to have a mainstream publisher because of their distribution network. But if nobody, I have a certain time period that I'm not telling anyone. If I don't get a bite within a certain time period, the next book is on its way out. You know, I know what the next book that I'll play around and get done will be.
Well, speaking of that, we have a question here. It sounds like from a fellow artist. As a singer-writer, I struggle with the guilt that comes with doing art versus other activities since I'm not a full-time artist and COVID sure didn't help. Any tips?
I don't think you should feel guilty about doing what you need to do in your life to live. So when I do work for other people, when I do work for the library, I do work for the Creative Entrepreneur Fellowship, where I'm doing a lot of administrative stuff, that check will help pay for my 12 by 12 challenge class. That check will help pay for Valerie's class. That check will help pay for the illustrator, right? So that's how I think of it, that work is helping me do my art. Right? Some people are independently wealthy. A woman I know years ago, what she used to do is she was a facilitator. She used to travel around the world. She would work for 2 or 3 years really hard, and then she took a year off to do all the things she wanted to do. And then she'd go back and work real hard, and then she took a year off. And that's how she decided. So if you're willing to live in a different way, you can figure out ways to devote more time to your art. But at the same time, if you have to be more practical and you have to financially take care of yourself while you're on the road to having your art be able to do that for you, everything you're doing is in service of your art. And so I hope that's helpful to you, because that helped me in terms of how I think about it.
Thank you. And we have about 8 more minutes. And Candelaria, was there anything that you wanted to show? We really had a lot of questions, and it's wonderful to have so much interaction with the viewers. Thank you so much, everyone.
I want to share my screen of my, I have 2 websites. This is Candelaria Norma Silva. Norma is my mom's first name, and so she gave me her middle name. Can you all see?
Yes.
Okay. And so it has, you know, my fans, and you can order from my website. I'll see if it opens up. If not, we won't worry about it. You could do it yourself. So I have pictures of my fans. I have reading tips, which for each book, which is, you know, hints for, so it doesn't seem, let's see if this will come up. I guess I should have pulled everything up. So all you're seeing is the cover, the first page of my website. So, oh, here it is. I'm sorry. What's the baby's name? So that's the latest. So I have tips, so you can download those free from the website. And I also wanted to share previously published work. So if you look, The Wind Did It and Grandpa Yam What Am, those were the 2 stories that were previously published in Ebony Jr. So I don't know how some of you are too young to have known Ebony Jr., but those were the covers. So I took that off. Yeah.
Yes, and I wanted to bring up a point that you made in our previous conversation, Candelaria, before this event, and that was there are benefits to ordering your books different ways. So if you order your books through your website, you can get a signed copy from the author. Is that right?
Yeah, so if you order straight from me, I will sign it. People put instructions on who they want me to sign it to. If you order from independent bookstores, that's great. You know, all the independent bookstores have them, or you ask for them. There's also something called bookshop.org, which is Ingram Spark is a major distributor, and they have relationships with all these independent sales. If you order from Amazon, it doesn't bother me. They're here, they're not going anywhere. Amazon, the more people who order and leave a review, the better it is, because it puts me up in the algorithm. So one of the things I did with the first book is we had a launch party, and there was an offer of a free Kindle download, and people would get it and they would review it on Amazon. And then that puts it up in the algorithm so that people who are looking for children's books would all of a sudden see the name of my book there. So you can choose however you do it is supportive of the artist. But for me, don't buy on Amazon if you're not going to leave a review. Because leaving the review after you're an official verified buyer is actually better for me as a writer.
All right, so review on Amazon or personal signed copy, and probably a place on your mailing list, I'd imagine, if we went on your website.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, this is wonderful. And I just want to say everybody here that's encountered Candelaria would agree that hearing your story, there's just there are so many lessons to draw from like one talk with you. It's just, there's never enough time, Candelaria.
Yeah, I think we have a few more minutes. I don't know what clock you're doing, but are there any final questions? Anybody wants to, or statements? If not, one of the things I want to say is,
It's me, Stacy. How are you today?
hi, Stacy.
Hi, everyone. I actually wrote a question in the chat. I asked, do you have any audio for any of your books?
No, that's something I'm trying to figure out how to do now. I really want to have audio versions of the books, either me reading aloud or, my son. I actually have an idea of having different voices and that people could download an audio. That's a whole nother learning curve. So I'm hoping to find somebody who could take me through that at some point, and then I can maximize that. But I'm really a page turner.
I know.
So for me, I'm gonna have to get over myself. Because I think like when you're riding in the car with kids, slipping in somebody reading a copy of the book, that's something that I want to find out about. But right now I don't know enough, and I'm trying to just, the competing interest. Okay, right now my goal is to get an agent or an editor a contract with the traditional press for one of these manuscripts, or 10. I'm not greedy, but I'll take 10. But just one would start, and then I'll figure out. But thank you for asking.
No problem.
There are a lot of thank yous here in the chat, Candelaria. So many here.
Well, thank you. It's great to see all the people here, and just to say, so many of you have realized your dream and are. I see something about independent bookstores in the chat. I can't scroll. Yeah. Yeah, bookshop.org. Yeah, that's the one through Ingram Spark. They are the distributors that some libraries and schools will use. So yeah, and so like Paper Cuts Books and JP, you could order through bookshop.org and specify what bookstore you want to do it to. But anyhow, I'm happy to see so many people whose art that I have admired, people I didn't know were artists, people who took the time out of the middle of your day to spend time with me. I'm going to be reading to children at the Cambridge Public Library in February. So those of you who follow me on Instagram or Facebook, you'll definitely see notices about that. But
thank you. And Candelaria, fan mail. So I guess your website can also receive messages.
Emails. Yeah.
All right. I'd like to plug that into the chat one more time for everyone. Let's see.
Author at CandelariaNormaSilva.com would be where you could write me an email if you wanted to.
Author at Candelaria Silva.
Candelaria Norma Silva.
NormaSilva.com.
Mm-hmm.
All right, it's in the chat.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Please come back next month, Wednesday, the 15th of February, where we'll have another lunch with an artist. So stay tuned. Thank you so much. Candelaria, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
You were awesome, Candelaria.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody got a screenshot. I wish I had.
Always, my friend. You are wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. Keep writing, keep creating, keep being positive people in the tribe of good people on the planet Earth.
Mhm.
Thank you.
You.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.